Hello friends, and it's Funky Play Brothers, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube. And today I'm reading part 4 of Five Nights at Freddy's Tales from the PIZZAPLEX 8 B7-2 by Scott Cawthon, Adrian Wagger, and Kelly Parra. Last time we left off, Billy thinks that this animatronic B7 came into his room, and then a security guard picked him up. After that, he realized that he was in motion. Whatever he was laying on was rolling down the hallway. They were taking him back to his room. No, Billy shouted. There was something in my room. Unfortunately, what Billy said sounded like, "Oh, hair, hing, Billy tried again. Please don't. There was something in my room. This came out no better. P-O, hair, hing, room. Through the confusion of movement, Billy spotted a nurse's uniform. Maybe it was one of the nurses who could understand him. He zeroed in on her wide eyes. He tried to throw her a pleading look. Either the nurse didn't understand Billy, or she didn't believe him. She did nothing to stop what was happening. Hoarse and starting to choke on his own spittle, Billy stopped yelling. His chest heaved. A few seconds passed in a continual blur of confusion. Then Billy felt his body land on his hard hospital bed mattress. More chaos. Billy felt something stretching across his chest and hips. A sting bit into his arm. More pressure. Something cold pressed against his right wrist. Then all of the movement stopped. Billy blinked several times and looked around. In the light spilling into the room from the hallway, he could see that he was back in his room alone. Billy tried to move, but he couldn't. Lifting his head, he looked down at his body. They'd strapped him to the bed. Billy was restrained. Not only that, whatever they'd given him was starting to make him feel woozy. His head felt heavier than it should have. And it felt like the air around him was thick and spongy. Suddenly, drowsiness made his eyes flutter. The light from the hallway disappeared. Someone had closed his door. Not only the faintest glow came from the night light above Billy's bed. It threw out a pale yellow light that barely reached the bed's railing. Billy moaned. He squirmed, trying to loosen his bonds. "Please," Billy said to the empty room. He wasn't sure who he was appealing to, but it didn't matter. No one answered him. No one came to help. Click, swish, clickety-click, squish, click, click, click. Billy moaned again. The thing was still here, and it was much, much closer. "I want back in," the voice was the same one that had called Billy's name. The voice was darkly musical and raspy, contorted as if it came through a damaged synthesizer, which of course it did. The last time Billy had spoken as B7, he'd used the external synthesizer in his computer. A couple days before that, though, Duck had implanted a speaker in Billy's throat. The speaker had its own synthesizer, but Billy hadn't been able to get it to work before. He'd broken down and fled his house. The clicking and slippery sounds moved away from Billy's bed, then skirted into the far corner of the room, and then scurried back again. "Please," the voice wailed. "Won't you let me back in? I've missed you so much. We were buddies, weren't we? You and me. We're supposed to be together." Billy lay perfectly still. He didn't respond to the voice. Something jolted Billy's bed. He stiffly grasped as he tried to raise his head so he could see the thing that spoke to him. But Billy couldn't make out what was clicking and sliding over the floor. "Please let me back in," the voice urged again. "You need me. Look what they've done to you. It's so sad. You're tethered like an animal. I can help you if you invite me back in. Come on, B7, we're better together. You know we are." The clicking got louder, and the bed vibrated again. Billy strained his neck. And there he saw it. A vaguely human-shaped metal and plastic head rose above the side of Billy's mattress. Billy heard a whimper gurgle in the back of his throat as he stared at bits of bloody flesh and tissue that clung to a tangled mass of metal plates and other mechanical parts. As grisly as the thing was, Billy couldn't stop staring at it. As two of the plates parted, and it spoke again. "I'm your friend, B7, it said. "I want to help you. Everyone in your life has failed you. No one else helped you when you were alone. They only took you from you. They stole from you. They tried to control you. I just want to work with you. We're a team." Billy wanted desperately to block out its words. He wanted to cover his ears, but his hands were bound. The ghastly flesh metal mass dropped out of Billy's view. More clicking made it clear the thing was moving around to the other side of the bed. "You know what you really are, B7, the thing said as it clicked. "I only want you to be happy. And to be happy, you have to live in your true life. Your true life is an animatronic. We're meant to be together. We were designed to be as one." Billy jerked his hand back and forth, trying to free himself. He thrashed against the strap over his chest. His efforts were futile. He couldn't get loose. The remote control, Billy thought. He could call for a nurse. Stretching at his fingers, Billy tried to find the remote. He couldn't. It must have been out of his reach. He was helpless. Billy was having trouble staying awake too. Whatever they'd injected into him was working its way into his consciousness. His focus was slipping away. His senses were getting duller and duller. "Please, B7, the thing says. I have your best interests at heart. You have to listen to me." "No, I don't," Billy thought, and he was right. Billy gave into the fog that was filling his mind. Closing his eyes, he fell asleep. Sunlight intruded into Billy's soft, gray world. The effect of it was like cold water in the face. Billy woke fully, abruptly, asleep one second and totally alert the next. Billy went into a panic, feeling like he should be alarmed, but not sure why. Billy's hands groped around. He found the remote that hung on the rail of his bed. He pushed the button that would call Glory to him. She'd tell him why he felt so frightened and threatened. Gloria was in Billy's room within seconds of his summoning her. "You poor thing," Gloria cried as she trotted toward Billy's bed. "I heard you had some excitement last night." She hurried to Billy's side and patted his shoulder. At least Gloria was still on his side. Billy was freaked out for reasons he didn't understand, but his freak out level was dropping a few notches. "What happened last night?" Billy asked. He knew something had, but he could only hold on to wisps of images of nightmares. Gloria moved away from the bed and reached for the pitcher of water that sat on Billy's nightstand. "It sounds like you had a whopper of a panic attack," she said as she poured him a cup of water. She handed the cup to him. Billy at first thought he wouldn't be able to lift his hand and take the water. He didn't know why he thought that. He'd been drinking on his own for 3 days. Billy's hand came off the bed and grasped the cup of water with no trouble at all. He took a drink and handed the cup back to Gloria. Then he repositioned himself in the bed. He wasn't sure why he was so relieved that he could do that too. Billy frowned. Why did he think he'd gone through something more than a panic attack the night before? Billy left the hospital the following week. His grandma brought him home. "Last year, I fell and broke my leg," Billy's grandma said, as she walked with Billy up a long wood ramp to a covered porch stretching across the front of a small yellow cottage. That's when I had all the ramps installed. I have to say they were making it easier to get around. Even now that I have 2 legs to use again," she glanced at Billy, who was thumping along next to her with one leg and his crutch. Lucky, don't you think?" Billy concentrating on his ascent to the porch. I didn't answer his grandma's questions. Instead, he paused and looked up a little house his grandma lived in, set in the middle of a wooded acre just outside town. His grandma's house was surrounded by several flower beds and many thick clusters of dark green bushes with tiny leaves. Although Billy wasn't crazy about all the flowers, they look messy because there are too many of them, he thought. He found the bushes and all the tall evergreen trees that encircled the house to be pretty. The house itself was pretty too. With a steep green metal roof and 2 dormers, the house was like one of the ones he'd seen in magazines. The place is usually described as cozy or inviting. Billy supposed this house could be that. He just didn't know if he wanted to accept the invitation. But Billy followed her inside anyway and stopped in a small slate-floored entryway. The floor was covered with a yellow and blue rag rug, and the entryway's walls were blanketed with daisy-modified wallpaper. Looking around, Billy remained silent. Lately, Billy had spoken as little as possible ever since he'd been told he was being placed in his grandma's care. Billy had withdrawn into himself. Or maybe learning that he would be living with his grandma wasn't what caused Billy's sudden desire to pull inward. Maybe it was something else. Billy had a feeling it might have had something to do with the night he couldn't remember, but then again, perhaps it didn't. All of the first few days of Billy's new life had felt exciting and hope-filled. Billy had realized that the world was way too big for him. Having spent the previous 16 years living as an animatronic, Billy was pretty much clueless about how to live as a man. A few days before Dr. Lindstrom, no Alice or I had visited Billy again, and she'd explained to him that because he'd chosen to live as a robot for so long, his personality had gotten to develop naturally as most children's personalities did. He basically had lived in what his former doctor had called a mental and emotional straitjacket. You may have some memories of who you were before you chose to live as an animatronic. He had said, but those aren't enough to inform who you are as an individual. It will take a bit of time for you to figure out who Billy is, what kind of person you want to be. Billy's grandma stowed her purse in the drawer of a small cabinet in the entryway, and she hung up her cardigan on a mirrored oak coat rack attached to a compact bench. Billy's grandma studied him. Her gaze went to his beanie, which she'd commented on at the hospital. "Why are you wearing that silly hat?" she asked when she picked him up. "It covers my ears," Billy had told her. "Perhaps a nice simple bandana would have been better," she'd suggested. Billy had looked at her blankly, and sighed and let the subject go. Now she frowned, whether about his hat or his continued silence. Billy didn't know. Sighing. Billy didn't know. Sighing. Billy's grandma pointed straight ahead toward a short hallway. "Both bedrooms are down that hall on the right, just beyond the living room." She gestured over her right shoulder, and Billy looked into a cramped living room, crammed full of crammed with an oversized yellow floor sofa, a large wood rocking chair with a paddle green and beige striped seat cushion, a yellow wingback chair, and a simple light-colored wood coffee table, and 2 matching end tables. The room felt stuffy. Not thrilled with the profusion of flowers outside, Billy was even less happy with all the flower things inside. Besides, the sofa's pattern, the room's yellow walls were covered in paintings of photographs of flowers, and 2 vases stuffed with the fresh flowers sat on the end tables. Another vase filled with more flowers was perched on a thick wood mantel, maybe oak, above a pin-sized brick fireplace. Billy couldn't imagine sitting in a room. It would feel claustrophobic. In the corner of the living room, a heavy carved wood grandfather clock guarded the space. A big brass pendulum attached to a long metal rod swung back and forth inside the clock, filling the room with a tick, tick, tick that got on Billy's nerves. No, it was more than that. The ticking made him anxious. Why? The kitchen is this way. Is that what? The kitchen is that way, just through the dining room. Billy's grandma said, pointing to the left of the front door, toward the opposite side of the entryway from the living room. You probably don't cook, she said. Or do you? Billy knew how to cook the white foods he'd eaten as an animatronic, but he didn't want to eat those foods anymore. He figured he could learn to cook other things, but he didn't feel like explaining that to his grandma. He shrugged in answering to her question. Billy's grandma gave him a sketching look, the expression bunched up in many wrinkles around her small mouth. Then she shrugged in return. No matter, she stepped into a dining room barely big enough to hold a round, dark-colored wood table surrounded with uncomfortable-looking straight-backed chairs with furry yellow seat cushions. That's where we're going to stop for today. And then we'll see next time if B7 got inside Billy. So, friends, thanks for listening. Tune in next time for part 5 of B7-2. Follow us on Twitter at the Funky Play Bros. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Funky Play Brothers. Support our vlog at cashapp at the $sign Funky Play Brothers, so we can have more unboxings, more taste tests, more adventures, more monies, and for support. Thank you for watching. Bye.